BBC News with Sue Montgomery. Russia has been accused by the head of the World Food Programme of declaring a war on global food security. David Beasley said Russia's blockade of Ukraine's ports on the Black Sea threatened food supplies for 400 million people.
We're facing the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II. Just when you think it couldn't get any worse over a year ago, you had Ethiopia, then you had Afghanistan, and then the breadbasket of the world. This now got the longest bread lines of the world. And so now, because of this crisis, we're taking food from the hungry to give to the starving. It's absolutely a crisis mode. What do you think is going to happen when you take a nation that normally grows enough food to feed 400 million people and you sideline that?
The United States Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has said 20 countries have stepped forward to supply additional military support to Ukraine. Mr. Austin spoke after hosting a virtual meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group.
I'm especially grateful to Denmark, which announced today that it will provide a Harpoon launcher and missiles to help Ukraine defend its coast. I'd also like to thank the Czech Republic for its substantial support, including a recent donation of attack helicopters, tanks, and rocket systems.
A Russian diplomat has quit over his country's invasion of Ukraine, calling it bloody, witless and absolutely needless. Boris Bondarev, a counsellor at Russia's mission to the United Nations in Geneva, said he'd never been more ashamed of Russia as when it sent its troops across the border. He accused the foreign ministry in Moscow of fostering warmongering, lies and hatred. Russian media are reporting that the Ukrainian soldiers who surrendered at the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol will face a trial in the same city. Denis Pushilin, the leader of the self-declared Donetsk People's Republic in southeastern Ukraine, said everyone who left the plant last week was being held on his territory. It's not clear how many would face a tribunal. A group of British politicians has described the government's handling of the withdrawal from Afghanistan last year as a catastrophic failure of intelligence, diplomacy and planning. In a report, the MPs said British soldiers and their Afghan allies were utterly let down by deep failures of leadership. Here's Paul Adams.
Their report praises many of the British officials and soldiers sent to try and manage the terrible situation at Kabul airport. But it criticises what it calls misleading statements about the evacuation process and says the leadership at the Foreign Office should be ashamed that 2 civil servants risked their careers to bring to light the appalling mismanagement of the Afghan crisis. The Foreign Office defends its record. Our staff worked tirelessly, a spokesperson said, to evacuate over 15,000 people from Afghanistan within a fortnight.
BBC News. The World Health Organization does not believe the outbreak of monkeypox outside of Africa requires mass vaccinations. In an interview with the Reuters news agency, a senior official said the primary measures to control the outbreak were contact tracing, isolation and safe sexual behaviour. He said immediate supplies of vaccines and antivirals were relatively limited. More than 30 people are reported to be missing in the northeastern Nigerian state of Borno after being attacked by suspected militants at the weekend. Witnesses said the victims from the town of Ran were fired on by gunmen and motorbikes when they went into the bush to fetch firewood. Several escaped with gunshot wounds. Reports from the United States say the holiday rental firm Airbnb is suspending its domestic business in China, with the COVID lockdown there showing no signs of ending. Phil Mackey in Washington has the latest.
Though Airbnb hasn't confirmed anything on the record, the reports are believed to be true. China is still subject to some of the toughest COVID restrictions in the world, and that means travel into and around the country is extremely difficult and, in many places, impossible. Chinese travellers spend a lot of money. In 2019, the year before the pandemic, they made 155 million journeys abroad. Airbnb set up its business in China in 2016, but it's proved costly and difficult to operate.
The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is facing renewed calls to resign after new pictures were published of him drinking at a gathering in Downing Street at a time when parties were not allowed because of the COVID pandemic. The pictures were obtained by ITV News. The opposition Labour Party said the images showed the Prime Minister lied to Parliament when he repeatedly insisted all COVID rules had been followed. BBC News.